I'm Mark Hasselbell. I'm a game audio designer from Denmark, and I'd like to showcase and share some thoughts on a Unity Wwise system prototype I've been working on, which involves dynamically sequencing a series of fitting vocal mumblings for bad banjo jokes. Let me explain. I had an idea for a very small game that involved randomly sequencing surreal jokes with an accompanying dynamic voice system, but I don't have the time to bring the actual game to life in any capacity, so I chose to focus on the Wwise system instead and prototype that. In the search for bad and surreal jokes, a friend sent me the Ultimate Banjo Joke Compendium, which I'm using as a basis for this experiment. It features very crude and terrible jokes, but they're quite fitting. In this particular prototype, the concept is as follows. In a C# script, a handful of jokes are loaded into an array, read from a CSV file, split into joke setup and joke punchline, which will allow me to randomly combine the two into an incoherent mess. The resulting jokes are completely nonsensical most of the time, but I needed something with a variable joke and punchline length to test the system, so it doesn't matter much, and the results can be quite amusing. In the prototype, I press a button to pull a random joke from the data pool, and the text starts being shown on screen, one individual character at a time. I've devised a system that will trigger Wwise events in a sequence of a certain length, fitting the expected duration of the text being shown on screen. This will, in theory, provide a suitable voice accompaniment for the joke. The speed of the on-screen text and pauses can be dynamically changed at will. The intro to this video featured this system, but let's hear it in action again. In a bit more depth, the system works like this. I have the strings from the data pool loaded in from the CSV file, which allows me to randomly combine joke setups and joke punchlines. I'm able to control the speed by which each character is sequentially shown on screen, alongside pauses between characters and pauses between words. And with this data, I can, based on the total character count of the string, calculate how long it'll take before the string has finished being shown on screen. With this data in mind, I can sequence a series of Wwise events for random containers holding vocal mumbles and noises, which will fit the string length, meaning you get a sense of it being read aloud by the voice system, and stopping in a place and time that makes sense. I chose to record non-language mumbling to allow me to more easily string together and sequence these without having to worry too much about pronunciation or syllables or language. With a system like this and the focus on banjo jokes, it's hard not to let your thoughts wander back to the 90s and the classic games by Rare, such as Banjo-Kazooie, where cartoony vocalizations are sequentially triggered when a character is speaking. While I didn't want to go down that route, I did want something not referring to specific spoken language, so I went with mumbles and odd vocal noises instead. I did, however, want to infuse it with some off-kilter atmosphere, as per the initial idea for the small surreal game. So I bounced all the source assets to dictaphone tape, and I layered with some tape noises and tape mechanism sounds. But layering dictaphone processed vocal mumbles with no real regard for human speaking rhythm starts or stops also doesn't quite work. When the text starts being shown on screen, a specific event is triggered that fires off the sentence start random container, which contains some consonant vocalizations, which are then followed by a longer layered vocal sound. The same goes for when the on-screen text is finished, to give a natural sense of ending, which, without it, would most likely result in the main event being cut short at a possibly odd and unnatural time. While this is a prototype not meant for anything other than personal exercise, there are some shortcomings with this system and earlier iterations. The first idea was to tie Wwise events to specific words, as they're being shown on screen, generating a vocal sequence tied to the total character count. With this approach, I'd have to do some calculations and sorting of the entire dataset before recording, as I would like to know things like longest word in terms of character count, the shortest, the possibly average, and similar, so I could make sure I had enough vocal variations of that length to comfortably spell out the words with the voice system. This would ultimately make the whole thing pretty non-expandable and not very modular. If I wanted to go in and add entries to the CSV file, or change the entire data pool to something that would have a lot longer or shorter words, then the system wouldn't be able to support that change, as it would be tied to the initial dataset. Another greater issue with the initial idea was that the reading speed would be somewhat fixed. If I wanted to dramatically speed up or slow down the reading pace, the vocal assets would introduce abrupt endings or odd pauses, as the assets are not time stretchable in Wwise. One fix could be to recall all the assets with a vocal tail, meaning there would be ample time to do a quick fade if I needed to cut a word before it actually finished playing in its entirety. Or to manually place wave markers at fitting points in the mumble track to figure out where one could naturally end at the nearest marker to get a sense of a natural stop. But the greatest issue there was, which I think a lot of technical sound designers run into when trying to design similar voice systems, was that stringing together vocal mumbles and noises into a sequence makes it really difficult to get out of Banjo-Kazooie territory. Because the result is just naturally pretty cartoony. With no sense of a meaningfully structured sequence of naturally decipherable vocal sounds and patterns, it just sounds like random voice bits being fired sequentially. So with all of that in mind, I chose to design this system as I did, and I think it works quite well for the prototype that it is, even if the vocal stops are not quite there yet. It seems a bit unnatural. I would have loved to try to devise a system which is more dependent on individual words and word length rather than the total character count as sort of a timer, but perhaps I'll return another time to try that out. I feel the need to state the following. I don't have anything against banjos or banjo players, but the fact that someone out there holds enough of a grudge against banjos to write and release a compendium of jokes about them is just really funny to me. Thank you for listening and watching.